The night had a way of swallowing a man whole, not with teeth or claws, but with silence so deep it pressed against your ribs. Silence that made you think too much. Silence that made you hear things that weren't there. I remember standing on the forward picket line, musket under my arm, watching the tree line shift like a dark tide. Somewhere out there, beyond the ravines and broken fence lines, the Confederates watched us too. Or maybe they slept. Or maybe they were waiting. But whatever they were doing, the night felt wrong. Too still. Too expectant. I kept my eyes on the low fog that drifted along the ground, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Behind me, the parapets and trenches of our line looked like scars carved into the earth. Lanterns burned low, murmurs carried over the dirt like restless thoughts, made us quieter, made us older. Even the young ones like Sam couldn't pretend anymore. He stood near me, shifting his feet, trying to act like the cold didn't bother him. But I could see the tremor in his hands when he reloaded his rifle after a dry fire check. He didn't see me looking, or maybe he did, and he didn't want to show it. "Sir," he whispered, voice roughened by the night air, You ever get the feeling the dark is watching you?" I didn't want to scare him, so I told him the truth in a way that might steady him. "Only when I'm alive enough to know it matters." He gave a quiet laugh, short, uneasy. Then the ground behind us thudded with approaching boots. Two officers, one carrying a lantern hooded by a hand. The light flickered across their coats, across the mud spattered high on their legs, across the tightness in their expressions. "Picket detail," the lieutenant murmured. "Stay sharp. We're sending out a recon patrol. 4 men. We need eyes on the ravine. Rebel activity stirred up down there." The words slid into my stomach like ice. A night patrol meant danger. A night patrol meant someone wouldn't come back. We all knew it. Sam swallowed hard. I heard it even through the quiet dot. Before I could say anything, the lieutenant pointed at me. "You, Minnesota. You're on it. Dash, you move well in the dark." My mouth went dry. Not from fear. Not exactly. But from the knowledge of what I would be stepping into. Sam stepped forward half a pace. "Sir, I can go too." I turned. "Sam," but the lieutenant cut in. "Good. We need steady hands and young eyes." Sam's eyes flicked toward me. He wanted approval. Or courage. Or maybe he just wanted someone to know he was trying. I didn't tell him no. I didn't tell him he should stay. I didn't tell him he didn't owe this war anything. I should have. God help me, I should have. The 4 of us were gathered at the gap in the forward trench. The captain crouched low, drawing a rough line in the dirt with his finger. The lantern showed the map of the land in brief strokes. "Move down the dry creek bed. Keep low. Report any rebel movement. Engage only if fired upon." His voice was steady, but his jaw was tight enough to crack stone. The lantern hood closed. The world blinked back into darkness. We slipped into the night, feet sinking silently into damp earth, rifles held across our chests. The air smelled of pine, cold iron, and the faint smoke of distant campfires. Every step felt too loud, every breath too bright. Sam walked just behind me, breathing shallow. I could feel his fear, could almost hear his thoughts breaking the quiet. We descended into the ravine, where shadows clung to the rocks like wet cloth. The moon vanished behind cloud. The world narrowed to what we could feel more than see. I raised a hand, signaling a halt. The others froze. No words, just listening. Wind sifted through brittle branches above us. A distant metallic clink carried from somewhere ahead. Then a low murmur. Voices. Soft. Too soft to be ours. I leaned close to Sam, whispering, "Stay low. Stay behind me." He nodded. In the dim, I saw his eyes widen, not with fear, with purpose. We moved forward a few feet, slow as breath. I peered around a boulder. Shapes moved in the dark. 3, 4, maybe more Confederates. Too close. Too many. My heart slammed once against my ribs. I signaled retreat. Slow, quiet, no sudden movements. We turned. We stepped back. A twig snapped under someone's boot. Not mine, not Sam's. One of the others. The dark erupted. A shout. Gunfire. Flash. Smoke. The world broke open in white sparks and roaring sound. I hit the ground. Mud sprayed into my mouth. A bullet cracked over my head. "Sam!" I yelled. "Here!" he cried back. But the voice was too far, too exposed. Another flash, another roar, and then a sound I will never forget, a soft, choked gasp swallowed by the dark. "Sam!" I screamed. No answer. Only the echo of gunfire fading into the trees, and the cold realization sinking through me like winter water. He wasn't behind me anymore. He wasn't anywhere. The night had swallowed him whole. Morning at the siege lines never really felt like morning. The sky would pale, yes, shifting from black to a thin grey, but the light came without warmth. It crawled over the trenches like a reluctant guest, catching on the rough-hewn timber supports, the stacked gabions, the scattered tools left half buried in mud. Tents sagged under dew, canvas darkened by damp, their edges stiff with frost. Beyond them the distant hills were nothing but shadowed ribs of land rising from mist. Everything silent, everything still except for us. We were always moving, always working, digging, repairing, hauling logs, driving stakes, wiping mud from our rifles so they wouldn't turn to rust in our hands. And on that morning, the one after the night patrol, the world felt heavier than usual. I squatted beside the trench wall, scraping wet clay from my boots with the back of my knife. The mud clung like it had intentions of its own, thick as bread dough and twice as stubborn. Men moved around me in tired silence. Some carried crates of cartridges. Others stacked earth in fresh parapets. Every movement slow, mechanical. Jensen sat beside me, arm still stiff from his last wound, but insisting he was fine. He kept looking at me from the corner of his eye. I knew what he wanted to ask. Everyone wanted to ask. Finally, in his low gravel voice, he murmured, "You didn't see him at all?" I shook my head. The breath that left me felt thin. No, not after the first shots. He rubbed a hand over his face. Mud smeared up his cheekbone. "You think—" He didn't finish the sentence. I didn't let him. "We don't know anything yet. They're sending another detail out. They'll look." Jensen exhaled through his nose. It sounded like anger, or maybe grief. "He was just a boy," he muttered. I didn't answer. It was true, and hearing it out loud made something twist inside me. The truth was simple and heavy and cruel. Boys died here. Boys disappeared. The earth took them. The fog took them. The night took them. And the war didn't care. Around us, hammers thudded into stakes. Shovels bit into earth. Someone coughed until he nearly retched. The smell of boiled coffee drifted from a cook fire somewhere behind the main line. All of it felt wrong that morning. Too normal. Too calm for what the night had stolen. A corporal passed by, his beard slick with dew, calling, "Detail for firewood. Let's move. Minnesota, on your feet." I rose, sheathing my knife. The corporal waved him off. "Not you. You're on medical duty until your shoulder's cleared. Surgeon's orders." Jensen grumbled something under his breath. Probably about surgeons, orders, or both. I gave him a small nod. "Get some rest. I'll check back later." He didn't smile, but he didn't argue. I joined the wood detail, a group of 6 men trudging beyond the second trench line toward a stand of fallen timber. The air bit at my throat cold enough to sting. Frost crackled under our boots. Every breath made small ghosts in the air. Private Mills, a lanky man missing more buttons than he had left, muttered, "You hear about last night's picket loss?" A sharp pain tightened in my chest. I kept my voice steady. "We don't know that it's a loss." He gave a humorless snort. "We never know. Not till the war's done with us." The others didn't argue. What was there to say? We reached the woodpile, a scatter of chopped logs, broken branches, and tree trunks stripped of bark. Frost made everything shine like it had been dipped in glass. The landscape beyond rolled out in dull greys and faint blues, still wearing the night like a coat it didn't want to take off. I swung the axe, letting the rhythm settle me. Impact, crack, split. The sound echoed off the low hills. It was the most honest work I'd done in days. But even as the log split beneath the blade, my mind kept drifting back. Back to the ravine. Back to the flash of gunfire. Back to Sam's voice, farther away than it should have been, calling out in terror and courage, all tangled together. My throat tightened. The axe wavered in my hand. Sam had talked about his family once, a small farm. 2 younger sisters he was determined would never see war. He'd said it with that awkward kind of pride boys carry when they're trying to sound like men. I'd laughed. Not at him, but at the memory of myself at that age, thinking war was a place where you proved something. Now I knew better. War wasn't a test. It was a storm that didn't care what it tore loose. By the time we hauled the wood back, the sun had finally broken the horizon, a pale, half-hearted circle of gold smothered in haze. The trenches steamed softly, where frost melted into mud. Men warmed their hands around tin cups, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. Still no word about Sam. As I stepped into the main line, I saw 3 officers gather near the forward gap, maps in hand, expressions stone hard. One of them looked directly at me, and in that look, I saw it. We were going back out tonight. Another recon, another risk. But this time they expected trouble, and they expected us to find it. The siege wasn't quiet anymore. Something was shifting in the dark. I could feel it in the air, as sure as frost. And I knew, with a certainty that made my stomach knot, that we were far from done with what had begun in that ravine. The afternoon light never felt like afternoon anymore. It hung low and dull, sinking over the trenches like a blanket of wet wool. Smoke from the cook fires drifted across the camp, mixing with the bitter smell of spent powder carried by the wind. Rifle pits formed dark seams across the landscape, and half-finished breastworks reached out like broken ribs. The buildings of the nearby town, roofless shells and shattered chimneys, leaned against the sky like tired ghosts. Everything looked tired. Everything looked ready to crumble, and maybe we were too. I sat on an overturned crate beside the trench wall, elbows on my knees, staring at the muddy plank path beneath my boots. I hadn't taken a full breath since morning, not since the officers' glances told me all I needed to know. We were going back out there tonight, and this time, it wasn't to confirm rebel movement. It was to find Sam, or what the night had left of him. Jensen approached, favoring his injured arm but pretending not to. He lowered himself beside me with a grunt, boots scraping against the frost-bitten boards. "You're quiet," he said. "I've got reason." He nodded slowly. "Orders come down yet?" "Not spoken, but they're coming." Jensen rubbed the heel of his hand against his brow. "Damn fool boy," he muttered, but I could hear the tremor beneath the words. He shouldn't have been sent out. I didn't disagree, but blaming the officers wouldn't bring Sam back. Around us, camp life pressed on in its weary rhythm. Men boiled coffee thick as tar. Others patched torn coats with whatever scraps they could find. Some slept sitting upright, backs against the earthworks, rifles across their laps like awkward companions. The siege had eaten the days until they all tasted the same. Only the night patrol broke the pattern, and it had broken far more than that. A shadow approached from the left, moving with purpose. Lieutenant Harding. His coat was stained from knee to hem with mud, and his face was lined deeper than it had been even yesterday. He stopped in front of us. "Minnesota, on your feet." I stood. Jensen did too, out of instinct. "Not you, Private Jensen," Harding said. "You're still under medical." Jensen's jaw tightened. He hated being sidelined. Hated it more after Sam's disappearance. Harding pulled a folded scrap of paper from his breast pocket and held it toward me. "Recon detail. Dusk. Same ravine. We need confirmation of what's moving down there." And he hesitated. His eyes shifted. "Just for a moment. And we need to look for the missing man, Whitaker." The paper crinkled in my hand. My stomach knotted tighter than a drum rope. "Yes, sir." Harding exhaled through his nose. "You'll take 3 men. You choose which. But take men you trust, men who can keep quiet." "Jensen should come," I said. Before I could stop myself, Jensen's head snapped toward me. Surprised, then hopeful, then grim. But Harding shook his head. "Not a chance. He can barely shoulder his rifle without pain. I need men who can run if they must. Orders stand." Jensen looked like he wanted to argue, to yell, to shove the lieutenant into the dirt and go anyway. But he said nothing. Harding lowered his voice. "Find what you can. If it's movement, we fortify. If it's nothing, we keep digging. If it's Whitaker—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. He walked off, boots splashing through shallow puddles frozen at the edges. I sat back down slowly. Jensen didn't sit. He hovered beside me like he might pull me up and drag me away from the orders. "You shouldn't go," he said. "I have to. You don't owe them that." I looked him square in the eye. I owe Sam. Jensen's breath caught. The fight drained from his shoulders. He nodded once, jaw twitching. You pick the right men, he said. You hear me? No fools. No loudmouths. I know. And you don't take unnecessary risks. I know. And if you see more than you can handle, we run. He finally allowed himself to exhale. Good. Because I swear, if you don't come back, I'll haunt me, I said. A faint smile cracked his face. Worse. I'll tell everyone you screamed like a hog the day you got stung by that yellow jacket. I didn't scream. You squealed. Despite everything, the fear, the ache, the weight in my ribs, I laughed. Warm. Human. Then the laugh faded, and the truth settled back where it lived. I needed to choose my men for a mission that could end with us not returning. I stood and looked across the trench line, saw men I trusted, men I didn't, men too tired to walk another yard, men too reckless to rely on. But three names rose above the rest. Corporal Briggs, steady, experienced, calm under pressure. Private Mills, sharp eyes in low light, quieter than he looked and quick on his feet. And Callahan, Irish, short-tempered but brave in the dark and lethal with a rifle at close range. They were the best choices, the only choices. I found them one by one, told them the orders, told them the truth. No lies, no false bravado. Briggs nodded once. Understood. Mills swallowed hard. When do we leave? Dusk. Callahan smirked. About time we stretched our legs. His smirk didn't reach his eyes. Once they dispersed to prepare, I sat again on the crate, staring down the length of the trench, watching the sun sink slowly behind the distant hills, watching the shadows stretch long across the earthworks like fingers reaching for us. And all I could think, all I could feel, was the weight of the boy we had lost. Tonight, we would return to the place that took him. Tonight, we would walk back into the dark, and I prayed, silently, that the night would give him back. Or at least let us find the truth. There was a moment just before dusk when the sky turned the color of old bruise over the Yorktown lines. Not quite day, not yet night, just a fading, uncertain light that made every trench, every gun, every man look like a shadow pretending to be solid. The air cooled, but it didn't feel gentle. It felt like the land was drawing in a breath and holding it. The guns had been quiet most of the afternoon. A few distant reports from some battery testing range, a stray boom from the Confederate lines, but nothing like the heavy duels we'd heard days before. Now, as the sun sank, even those sounds died away. Silence settled over the siege, heavy, waiting, like someone closing a door softly and turning the key. I stood near the forward trench, watching the light fade over the scrub and tangled ground between us and the grey line in the distance. From here, the Confederate works were only a darker smear against the horizon, with the occasional glint of a gun muzzle catching the last light. To the left and right, the Union line stretched on earthworks, batteries, camps, roads, all wrapped around Yorktown like a noose that hadn't yet tightened. Behind me, men moved in low voices. A cook carried a blackened kettle along the trench. A corporal checked cartridge boxes. Someone muttered a prayer under his breath, barely louder than the rustle of canvas. We were all pretending it was just another evening, but the air told a different story. Footsteps approached along the duckboards. Jensen. He moved slower than he would have months ago, but he moved without anyone's help, and that fact alone was its own kind of defiance. You ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. He studied me for a moment and glanced out toward the darkening no man's land. You sure you picked the right men? Briggs, Mills, Callahan? I said. The best we've got for this. He nodded slowly. Briggs won't panic. Mills sees everything. And Callahan, he's too stubborn to die? I finished. A faint, humorless smile tugged at his mouth. Let's hope that works in your favor. We fell quiet then, both looking toward the ravine as the shadows pooled in its depths. It lay out there like a dark scar, the shape of it barely visible now that the sun had dipped low. By full dark, it would be nothing but a void, the kind that swallowed sound and men alike. I should be going with you, Jensen muttered. You shouldn't, I said. Not with that shoulder. He flexed it slightly, winced, and then tried to hide it. You'll slow us down, I added, or get yourself killed trying not to. He let out a slow breath. You're learning to be cruel. I'm proud of you. That wasn't cruel, I said softly. Cruel would be letting you come. He didn't argue after that. The call came just as the last band of color left the sky. Minnesota detail front and center. Briggs was there first. Tall, solid, face set like carved wood, rifles slung with easy familiarity. He looked like a man who'd already decided not to die that night and was willing to argue with the Rebs about it. Mills followed, eyes already scanning the dimming horizon, thin mouth pressed tight. He looked nervous but not broken, the kind of nerves that made a man more careful, not careless. Callahan arrived last, fastening his bayonet with a sharp twist. He gave me a sideways grin that never reached his eyes. Evening stroll, is it? Something like that, I said. Lieutenant Harding stood at the trench gap, his silhouette outlined by the faint glow of the camp behind us. He looked each of us over in turn, jaw working as if grinding stone between his teeth. You know your orders, he said. 4 men, down the ravine no further than the old fence line. You listen, you look, you don't play hero, you take fire, you fall back. You see anything worth reporting, you come back with the news, not your bodies. Yes, sir, Briggs answered. Harding's gaze settled on me. If there's any sign of Whitaker, his voice caught for the briefest of moments. Any sign at all, you mark the place as best you can and you get out. We will not lose another patrol trying to drag back a corpse under enemy guns. Is that clear? My throat clenched. Yes, sir, I said. Sam's face flashed behind my eyes, nervous, earnest, trying so hard not to show how much he wanted to be brave. I wondered if his family would ever know where he fell, or if the peninsula would just keep that truth for itself. Harding stepped back. Move out. And come back whole if you can. We slipped through the gap in the trench one by one, boots landing softly in the damp earth beyond. The air outside the works felt colder, as if the faint shelter offered by the earthworks had been peeled away. The sky overhead was a deep, starless blue, fading to black in the east. Somewhere behind the Confederate lines, a dog barked once, sharp and lonely, then went silent again. We moved in a low crouch, following the faint dip of the ravine path where we had gone before. The ground sloped away from the Union lines, swallowing what little light remained. Brush scratched at our legs, damp branches brushing against our sleeves with soft whispering sounds. No one spoke. Words felt like they would echo too loud in that narrowing space. Briggs took the lead, eyes fixed ahead. I followed, then Mills, then Callahan, a line of 4 shadows sliding along the wound between 2 armies. The further we went, the more the sounds of camp faded. The clink of tin cups, the murmur of tired talk, the occasional laugh, all swallowed by the dark. In their place came only the soft crunch of our own footsteps and the faint rustle of unseen things moving in the grass. My heart beat louder in my ears than any drum. I kept seeing the same moment over and over, turning in the ravine, the crack of rifles, Sam's voice shouting here from somewhere too far to reach, and then silence. I wondered if we'd hear him again. Not his real voice, but the echo of it. The way sound sometimes lingered in a man's mind long after the world had gone quiet. Briggs raised a hand, and we froze. We had reached the place where the ravine widened slightly, where the ground flattened out and the scrub thickened. It was here we'd lost sight of Sam. Here the night had taken him. The sky above the ravine was only a thin strip now, faint and pale between the leaning edges of earth and brush. Somewhere ahead, a short distance farther down, lay the old fence line Harding had mentioned, a half-rotted string of posts and rails that marked the furthest point of our advance. Mills knelt beside a twisted root, fingers brushing gently over scuffed dirt and broken leaves. Callahan pivoted slowly, rifle at the ready, watching the tree line as if he expected it to move. Tracks, Mills whispered. Boots, yesterday's. Ours. And maybe not ours. How many? Briggs murmured. Hard to say in this light, but more than 4. A chill spread through me that had nothing to do with the cooling air. If the Confederates had moved into this ravine after our patrol, if they'd walked where Sam had fallen, then we weren't just looking for a missing boy. We were walking straight into their memory of last night. Briggs motioned us onward, slower now, 1 step at a time, each boot placed with care. I could feel it, the line we were crossing from familiar fear into unfamiliar danger. We reached the ghost of the fence line, its broken posts jutting from the ground like rotten teeth. Beyond it, the land dipped and rolled toward the Confederate positions. We could go no further without stepping into open range of their pickets. "Hold here," Briggs whispered. We crouched beside the collapsed rails. The night seemed to press closer, carrying with it the faint scent of wood smoke and something else. Iron leather sweat, the smell of men encamped not so very far away. We listened. We waited. The silence crept over us like a tightening cord. Then, somewhere ahead and slightly to the right, a sound. Not loud, not clear. Just a faint shift, a clink, a murmur. Voices, Confederate voices. Low, careful close. Briggs's hand closed into a fist. "There," he breathed. "Pickets! Closer than we thought." My pulse hammered. We were at the edge now, one misstep from being seen, one snapped twig from being fired on at near point-blank range. And somewhere in all that darkness, somewhere not so far from where we crouched, lay the truth about Sam Whitaker, whether we wanted to find it or not. The moment we heard those voices, everything inside me tightened. Not just my muscles, not just my breath, something deeper. A quiet, instinctive warning that we were standing too close to the edge of the dark. Briggs motioned us lower until our chests nearly brushed the damp earth. The broken fence line hid us just enough to feel like a hiding place, but not enough to feel safe. Nothing felt safe out here. The voices came again, soft, almost conversational. 2 men at least, maybe 3. Just ahead, maybe 20 or 30 paces, tucked somewhere behind the folds of the ravine. Mills leaned in close, whispering so faintly I barely caught the words. They're not whispering to stay hidden. They're talking normal, which meant they didn't expect anyone to be here, which meant they felt secure, which meant the danger wasn't in them searching for us. It was in us stumbling any closer. Callahan wiped the sweat from his brow even though the night air had turned cool. He muttered, "If they've moved pickets up this far, they were looking for something or someone." The name hit harder than a bullet. Briggs slid his hand slowly through the grass, fingers brushing a patch of turned soil. His touch was gentle, deliberate. He'd tracked men and beasts before the war. He knew how to read ground like a page. He frowned. Then he pushed aside a clump of weeds. "What is it?" I whispered. Briggs didn't answer right away. He brushed more grass aside, revealing a shallow groove, a drag mark thin but unmistakable. Something or someone had been pulled through here. The breath left my chest in a single painful beat. The mark curved away from the ravine path, angling toward a low rise covered in briars. Not toward the Confederate lines, just off their flank. "They moved him," Briggs murmured. "They moved something." Callahan swore under his breath. "You think he was still alive?" Briggs didn't answer, which was answer enough. I felt cold. The kind of cold that starts in your bones and works outward until the air feels foreign. Images flooded me. Sam calling out, stumbling, falling, reaching, then hands grabbing him in the dark, men dragging him away while we scrambled blind in the chaos. "He could still be alive," I whispered, but I needed it to be said. Mills touched the mark with 2 fingers. "It's fresh," he whispered. "Last night, but not older." The ache in my chest twisted tighter. Briggs scanned the dark ridge above the drag trail. "If we follow this, we might walk straight into their flank. They're closer than we thought." Callahan's jaw flexed. "So what do we do? Turn back? Tell Harding they've pushed pickets up this far and leave the boy out here alone." His whisper shook slightly at the end. Callahan, for all his bluster, had taken a liking to Sam. We all had. Briggs looked at each of us, weighing not our words but our faces. He knew what mattered wasn't strategy. It was whether the 4 of us were willing to risk everything for one missing boy. He held up 2 fingers, pointing first toward the drag trail, then toward the distant Confederate voices. "We split our attention, not our men," he whispered. "We creep up the rise, stay down, stay quiet, and see what they've left behind." I felt my throat tighten. "Left behind?" Briggs didn't respond. He didn't need to. We moved slowly. So slowly I could feel each heartbeat as a separate event in my chest. The rise was a tangle of roots and briars, damp with evening dew. Every branch felt sharper in the dark. Every twig beneath my palm felt like a trap waiting to snap. We crawled on our bellies, bodies close to the earth, muskets slung tight to keep them from snagging. Our coats gathered burrs, our hands collected scrapes, but no one dared to pull back or hiss in pain. Halfway up the rise, the Confederate voices grew clearer, close enough that I could make out individual tones. One older, one younger. Didn't expect 'em out here again. Told you the trail's still fresh. Rebs'll shoot us for spook and shadows. Callahan raised his eyebrows at me, a silent message. They were looking for something too. The idea chilled me deeper than the night air. The possibility that both armies were searching the same ravine for the same missing boy. We reached the crest and flattened ourselves against the earth. Briggs lifted his head just enough to peer over the rise. I followed, inch by inch, careful not to dislodge a single pebble. Below us, in a small hollow between leaning trees, lay a scattering of signs that men had stopped here. A torn scrap of Union blue, a dented tin cup, boot prints, several crossing sharply before fading into the brush. And something else. Something small. Something I knew before I even saw it clearly. Sam's canteen. The one he'd painted initials on with charcoal. Dark and crooked. The one he'd bragged wouldn't get mixed up in camp ever again. I felt my breath catch tight. Painful. My eyes stinging before I could stop them. Callahan whispered, "Oh God, they had him." Briggs's jaw clenched. Quiet. Mills leaned slightly to the side, scanning the brush. Tracks go past here. They didn't stop long. I reached for the canteen, hand trembling, but Briggs grabbed my wrist. "Don't," he breathed. "You touch anything, they'll know we were here. And they're close enough to shoot without missing." He was right. Good God, he was right. But leaving it there felt like leaving Sam behind all over again. Below us, the Confederate voices drifted once more. Closer now. One of them kicked something. It clanged softly against rock. Briggs flattened himself. We followed instantly. The voices crept nearer, shadows moving in the brush. The kind of movement you didn't want to breathe through. Thought I heard something. Probably just a fox. "Keep your rifle ready." They were coming up our side of the rise. Not far, not fast, but with the steady pace of men who weren't afraid of what they must. Callahan mouthed, "We need to go." Briggs shook his head sharply. "Not yet." He was right again. If we moved too soon, we would give ourselves away. If we moved too late, we'd be caught in their lantern light. My heart pounded so hard I thought the earth might hear it. The brush moved, closer, closer, until I could see the faint shape of a rifle barrel sliding past the ferns below. Another step. They were 10 feet from us. Maybe less. Callahan's fingers tightened on his musket. Mill's breath trembled. I felt the sweat chill on the back of my neck. Briggs leaned in, his whisper a ghost. "When I signal, we fall back. Slow, silent. Don't break. Don't run." The brush parted again. A grey sleeve, then the glint of a belt buckle, then the outline of a face in the half-dark. If that soldier lifted his head another inch, he would see the whites of our eyes. My fingers curled into the soil. The world felt hinged on that heartbeat. Briggs's hand twitched, his long-awaited signal. We began to retreat, inch by inch, breath held tight, praying the night let us leave. And then, from deeper in the ravine, a sudden sharp cry split the dark. A human sound. Short, pained, real. The Confederate voices jerked up. "What was that?" "Over there. Bring the light." Briggs swore under his breath. "They've found something, or someone," Mills whispered, trembling. "That was Sam. It had to be. I didn't know. God help me, I didn't know." But I felt myself moving before Briggs could stop me. Toward the sound. Toward the danger. Toward whatever truth waited in the dark. Because if that cry was Sam, he was still alive. And if it wasn't, then someone else had just screamed in the place where my friend had vanished. Either way, we were past the point of turning back. The moment that cry cut through the dark, something inside me snapped loose. Not panic, not bravery. Something raw, deeper like instinct, dragging me by the ribs. I slid down the rise before Briggs could grab me, boots barely whispering against dirt. The others followed because they had no choice. In the dark, in enemy ground, a man alone was a dead man. The ravine narrowed into a throat of tangled roots and shadow. The air felt thicker here, colder, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Callahan hissed from behind, slow down, you'll get us all shot." But my legs refused the command. I kept moving toward where the sound had come from, a direction I could feel but not see, like a memory tugging at my sleeve. Briggs caught up, his hand clamping onto my coat. Minnesota, stop. We do this right, or we don't come back at all. I forced myself still. Barely. The dark pressed in around us, thick as wet wool. Ahead, through a weave of low branches, a faint glow flickered. A lantern, Confederate. Down, Briggs whispered. We sank into the brush just as two grey-coated soldiers came into view, lanterns swinging between them, casting long, sickle-shaped shadows across the ravine. They weren't talking now. Their heads turned sharply, rifles half raised, searching the ground. One man knelt, lifted something from the dirt. My stomach dropped. Sam's cap, crushed, spattered dark. The sight hit like a musket butt to the ribs. My breath gutted out, jagged and small. Mills made a soft, strangled sound. Briggs pressed a finger to his lips, a warning so sharp it stung. The two Confederates examined the cap, whispering back and forth. Couldn't have gone far. He was crawling. Look at the trail. Keep the light low. Don't spook 'em. A third voice rose from the dark beyond the lantern's reach. Bring him here. We're not hunting in circles all night. Callahan stiffened. There's more of them. Multiple. Damn. My pulse hammered as the Confederates began moving again, lantern held low, sweeping the ground. They were following a trail. One Sam had left while trying to escape, or crawl, or breathe, or pray. Every instinct screamed that we should fall back, slip away while we still had shadows to hide in, but I couldn't make myself turn. We go, Briggs whispered, a command and a plea at once. No further. This is past our line, past our orders, past sense. He wasn't wrong. We were deep now, too deep. One misstep from a bullet or a bayonet in the dark. But then, from deeper in the ravine, a weaker sound drifted out. Not a shout, barely a breath, a whimper. Small, human, hurting. Sam. It had to be Sam. My chest tightened so sharply I thought it might break. I'm going, I whispered. If the others refused, I would go alone. But I prayed they wouldn't let me. Briggs closed his eyes once, as if cursing whatever God ruled over fools, and nodded. Fine, but we move like ghosts. We slipped right as the Confederates moved left, circling the ravine wall and keeping to the densest brush. The lantern's glow cut across our path several times, once close enough that I saw dust drifting through its beam, but we didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move. Down the ravine, a slumped form came into view. My heart lurched, a boy-sized shape, lying against a fallen log, head turned towards the earth. Feet pointing wrong. Sam. Sam. I crawled closer, inch by inch, the ground cold beneath my palms. The lantern was approaching behind us. Time was a fuse burning short. Sam's coat was torn. Blood soaked the fabric along his ribs and shoulder. His breathing, if it was breathing, was shallow enough I had to lean close to hear it. Sam, I whispered, it's me. We're here. Hold on. His eyelids fluttered. His lips twitched. For a moment the world shrank to the boy beneath my hands. Minnesota? He breathed, so faint it broke me. I'm here, I whispered. We're taking you home. A branch snapped behind us, loud, sharp. The lantern glow burst closer. Briggs hissed, they're coming straight for us. Move him now. Callahan crouched to lift Sam's shoulders. Mills grabbed his legs. Sam cried out, weak, torn, and the sound ripped through the ravine like cannon fire. The Confederates shouted, there, over here. A rifle cracked. Dirt spat beside my hand. Run, Briggs roared. We surged upward, dragging Sam with us, stumbling over roots and rocks. The lantern swung wildly behind us, its glow growing larger, closer, shouts rising like dogs on a scent. Branches shattered. Earth kicked up around our feet. Sam gasped, a horrible wet sound. I felt the warm spray before I understood it. Callahan faltered. Mills screamed, they hit him. God, he's hit again. Briggs spun, firing blindly down slope to buy us seconds. Keep moving. Go. We hauled Sam up the ravine, his body growing heavier in our arms. Too heavy. His breath rattled in a way that didn't sound like breathing anymore. Halfway up the ridge, Sam's head slumped sideways, lips parting in a trembling exhale. The kind a man doesn't take back. Sam, stay with me, please. But his eyes were half open, staring. unblinking. No, no, my voice cracked, breaking into something that didn't sound like a soldier's voice at all. Sam Whitaker was gone, dead in our arms. Dead in a ravine between two armies that never knew his name. And the Confederates were still coming. Briggs grabbed my collar, yanking me upright. He's gone. Leave him. Move. I can't. You must. We can't die here too. Callahan smashed his shoulder into mine, pushing me forward. Run, damn you, run. The world became a blur of dark soil and burning lungs and rage. Too much rage to carry. We fled the ravine as musket fire chased our heels, Sam's blood still warm on my hands. And when we finally reached the line, panting, broken, shaking, I fell to my knees in the mud, the weight of it all collapsing through me. Sam was gone, his body lost behind enemy lines. And the night had taken more from me than bullets ever had.